Hello, and welcome to the Bikes or Death podcast. My name is Patrick, and I'm your host. And this is a show that talks about bikepacking, adventuring, and the cool people who participate. Before we get to today's show, just a quick couple notes. First off, in the real world, I'm a real estate agent. I'm currently working an open house, and it's very slow, so I decided I would multitask and record the intro and outro to this episode today. But there is a fire alarm that's beeping, and I've hid myself in a closet, and I've closed all the doors to try to make it as quiet as possible. If the mic picks that up, I'm sorry, I tried, but we'll get through this together. Also, I'm fighting a cold, so if it sounds like I just woke up, I'm just nasally. Hey, that's the way it goes sometimes. All right, well, continuing on with our Bikepacking Summit series, I'm excited today that Cruz is my guest. If you listen to the first two episodes, his name came up both times. He gave a really profound opening presentation about fear and how to deal with fear. That was truly powerful, not only because of the things that he said, but the way that he said them. And he's lived and experienced things that has allowed him to shape his understanding and his relationship with fear. And it's just it's an important message, and it's a different way of looking at fear than maybe what we're used to. So I'll let him tell you about that, but I'm super excited to have him on. It was a very impromptu interview. I actually had just wrapped up with one, and there was like a gap. The last day of the summit, I did, I think, 5 interviews in one day, and I pretty much just sat in a chair and I had them back to back to back. But there was a little window where I caught Joe, and he came and sat down with me, and we had a really great conversation. So anyway, I'm excited for y'all to hear that from the man himself, and you'll get a little taste of that presentation. It's not the whole thing. You had to be there kind of to get the full effect, but I think you get a really good idea. A few items of housekeeping. If you haven't heard, I am working diligently to fund a van that I want to turn into a mobile podcasting studio. The idea is that I'll be able to drive around the United States and interview people with a studio inside the van. I think it'd be really neat, but also just makes me getting to people and interviewing them in person way more accessible. I just got back from the summit, as you know, and this week actually, so today is Sunday when I'm recording this. I'll release it on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, the fam and I are headed out to Patagonia, Arizona, where I'm going to be at the Spirit World 100. I'm going to be talking to some people there, and also going to do the 50 milers so I can get a taste of what the riders are experiencing, and then just have a better understanding of the terrain and the ride and the people and everything. Get immersed in it, and then talk to some people. Should be a good time. So if you're in the area and you want to come hang out and ride bikes, you should do that. I'll be there Thursday through Sunday. So the idea is that I could take a van there and record an episode. I have started a GoFundMe to make that happen. I'm asking for $5,000, which sounds like a lot, but it's a sweet van. It's totally worth it. And really, if everybody who listened to this episode was to contribute like $1 or $1.50, we would more than have enough to afford the van. So if you'd like to help out with that, do me a huge favor and head over to go to GoFundMe and type in Bikes or Death, or you can go to my Instagram or Facebook and find a link there. We're at about $480 right now, so almost 10% of the way there. It's been running for about 5 days, so it's pretty sweet that a lot of people have jumped on to help out with that and think it would be a great idea. And I can't release the details yet, but there are going to be some nice incentives for people to donate. Well, I guess I can release. So here's what I'm going to do. I've reached out to some industry partners or some people in the industry that I have good relationships with. I'm going to be raffling off some really neat items. Not able to tell you what they all are right now. But trust me, there are some really good ones in there. So it doesn't matter if you've already donated or if you're going to donate. Basically, every dollar is a raffle ticket. So whenever I get to $1,000, I'm going to raffle off the first item, and then every 1,000 after that. And then when we get to 5,000, we'll just raffle off the rest of the shebang, everything left. I really appreciate all the people who I reached out to that were so generous to donate stuff. Like I said, I'm going to be revealing what those items are in the very near future. But for now, like I said, do me a favor, help me finance this van. It's a really perfect van. And if you're interested, listen all the way to the end of the episode and I'll talk more a little bit about it because some people were curious about the specs on the van and whatnot. But that's enough about that. In the vein of the Bikepacking Summit, I just published an article on my website, bikesfordeath.com, about the Bikepacking Summit. It's my 2019 Bikepacking Summit recap with pictures and just some words and insights and thoughts from yours truly. A lot of the pictures came from Miles Arbor. He let me borrow a bunch of them. A few of them are mine, but most of them came from Miles. So thanks, Miles. I appreciate every single one of y'all so much. This show is 100% listener supported, and it wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for the people who contribute and make it possible. If you'd like to hear how you can contribute and help grow the podcast, stick around all the way through the end of the episode, and I'll talk more about that. But for right now, the only thing that I ask is if you will go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. It is very helpful in growing the podcast and sharing it and allowing other people to find it. So if you'll do that, I appreciate it very much. All right, and now you'll hear Miles Arbor's version of the Bikes or Death intro song. This song he recorded on his episode. It was his idea. I had no idea he was going to do it, but he recorded it on a Gitalele in his van, and it's pretty sweet. So Miles Arbor, take it away.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
All right, man.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, first off, who are you?
My name is Joe Cruz. I am a professor of philosophy at Williams College in Western Massachusetts. I'm also an avid bike traveler and bike packer. Took my first bike packing trip in 1988, and I feel like I've been around this way of pedaling in the world for a while.
Yeah.
I'm one of the editors at large at bikepacking.com, and I count a lot of people in this community as friends and inspiration.
Right. So what are some things that you've done that people would know about you from?
A few years ago, Logan Watts and I put together the Green Mountain Gravel Growler, which is a tour around Vermont, a state that I now live in for half the time. And we're proud of that because it introduces people to the brewery culture, but also the wider culture of that beautiful New England state. I've scouted out routes in Kyrgyzstan, a route that was later used in large part for the Silk Road mountain race. I've personally done big trips in South America, from Ecuador down to the bottom of Chile, and a big route in Asia where I had a powerful time. I spent a year out there. So I've traveled overseas a bit, but also done domestic stuff that is meaningful to me and that stands out.
Yeah, you've been doing this a long time. What is the thing that keeps you going and so dedicated to this sport and this way of life for such a long period of time? Because was your first one on the full suspension bike with the trailer?
No, that came later.
Okay.
It's funny that you should bring that up. That was that year-long trip in Asia, where I was on a 2001 Santa Cruz Superlight, which I brought over there so I could do some racing, and I was pulling a trailer behind that bicycle. But that was well into my time doing this sort of thing, my first trip was on a GT Tequesta, a $340 bike from the local bike shop.
And that was like 88?
That was 88, yeah, 1988.
Nice.
And that was the White Rim Trail. And we'd heard from the local bike shop that folks on motorcycles were doing this circuit of gorgeous backcountry in Utah. And I first phoned up and then wrote a letter to the Rim Cyclery in Moab to send me a map of this White Rim Trail, which they did. I sent them a self-addressed stamped envelope, and they sent me a check, and they sent me back this map. And we took a train out west, and it was a transformative experience for me. And my first time out west, it was, we knew less than nothing, and that ignorance, sort of the depth of that ignorance, gave that trip a certain resonance and dimension. But to answer your question as to what keeps me doing this stuff, I think it's changed over years. I love just about every corner of bikepacking as something that people do, which is to say, I love the wild backcountry. You're by yourself, or you're with a small group of friends in a way off the grid context. I love that aspect of bikepacking. If you're on a full suspension bike, or you're on your hardtail and you've got a backpack on and all your gear with you, that to me is a compelling image of bikepacking, and maybe it was even the dominant image as recently as 6 or 7 years ago. But I also very much appreciate and love the kind of riding that brings you through developed areas and introduces you to culture and the people who live in the place where you're traveling. And maybe gravel bikes or all-road bikes have opened that aspect of it up a little bit. So I do both of those and love them in equal parts.
Well, it's interesting. You are extremely well-traveled, and on a bike at that. And you just speak from a different place of experience than most people that, that haven't had those same types of experiences.
Thanks.
So what is it that you look for now if you're going to plan a route? Like, what inspires you to go to
Kyrgyzstan? Yeah.
Kyrgyzstan. What are you looking for if you're going to go and do something like that?
I made this joke a couple of days ago at this Bikepacking Summit, but the joke was enough serious that I can tell it again, which is I'm often looking for places where our popular conception of that place, what we read in the news, what we hear from whatever sources we hear global news from. I'm looking for places where what we hear tells you not to go, or to be wary, or to wonder and be concerned about the difference between you and the people that you'll meet there. And I say it as a joke because, it's not literally true that I open the newspaper and check to see where there's conflict in the world and I buy the ticket to go there. But that's pretty close to true, which is to say, I want to experience places in this world that are where our narrative about those places is a distortion. And I want to, in a way, it goes back to being a professor and standing in a classroom and lecturing to young people. I never want to be that professor who lectures on human nature but hasn't met human beings. So planning a trip to Syria before the most serious aspects of that recent conflict broke out, planning a trip to Syria and flying into Aleppo and riding down through Jordan, crossing the Bay of Aqaba, and then riding through Egypt, and being there right at the brink of the so-called Arab Spring and Tahrir Square. This is in January 2011. Like, that kind of experience for me is crucial for my engagement with a global culture and with difference that I respect and care about. So that's what drives me to visit the places that I want to visit.
Yeah, that's a much, it's like you said, it's very counterintuitive to the way you might approach, but you're doing it for a very intentional and an important reason for yourself.
I am.
To give a broader perspective to what's actually happening, which I never went to college, but I mean, just as someone who's out there teaching and trying to inspire a new generation, like you're doing it in a very purposeful way, and it's really powerful.
Thank
It's
you.
like
Thank
really
you for saying
neat.
that.
So I mean, the truth is you've done a lot, and we don't have all the time in the world to go into all of them, but through your trips, you've had to encounter your own personal fears
That's
at
right.
different times,
Right.
as we all would if we were traveling these kinds of distances in different areas and meeting different people and not speaking the language, right? So
Right.
you gave a presentation here at the summit talking about fear, and how to overcome that. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you can do it however you want to, but maybe we could start with like what your main points were,
Sure.
and then maybe some stories that kind of illustrate that, or a good story.
Yeah, I think I can say something about that. It's not the first time I gave that talk, but every time I give it, it changes a little bit because I grow from having conversations with people about fear and about putting oneself out in this world. And I think through my own relationship to years of bikepacking. So the way I'm thinking about it these days is fear is a source of lesson and inspiration for me. I don't shy away from my own fears. I try to meet them head on and try to understand them as they present themselves to me. And I wanted to identify 4 possible ways in which fear has taught me something and might teach all of us something. So the first way was to say that sometimes in the profundity of an experience, in the sort of the scale of the experience, the fear that you thought you were going to have before you went into it, or maybe even the fear that started to well up as you were in that experience, that fear evaporates. And what I mean by that is that the fear becomes something insignificant against a bigger background of the presence in the experience itself. And one of the stories I told about that was traveling in Tibet and being at high altitude and maybe not timing my passage over a high pass correctly, and so getting up to that high point, 16,000 feet in the middle of the night in freezing conditions, and not really being enough of a master of my thoughts to have put my gloves on, and not really being aware of my own body. Like, that can be a fearful experience, but on the other hand, that fear in a way evaporated into the starry sky because I was in this incredibly profound, moving place. And we often find ourselves, it doesn't have to be a big trip, it can be in your backyard, but we often find ourselves in situations where if we're open enough and present enough to what's around us, then that fear, it becomes an insignificant and decreasing part of our reality. And that's happened to me, and I think it's happened to other people. If we can concentrate on that possibility.
I can absolutely relate to that.
Yeah. Sort of the bigness of the experience overshadows the fear.
Yeah.
And so that was one lesson, and then another lesson that I feel like I've tried to cultivate about fear is that in your own exhaustion, in your own effortfulness, the repetitive and cyclic motion of riding a bicycle, the simple camp chores that you do before sleeping every night, like that kind of basic embodied engagement with the world, being tired, being maybe undernourished, being a little dehydrated.
And maybe it's raining on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the shivering and the looking up at the sky for a relief from the elements. Like in those sensations, I feel like we can find a relief from our fear, because our embody, like being the bodies that we are and being the bodies in this cyclic motion, is a kind of meditation, if you like.
Yes.
And that meditation is or maybe at some points can be an antidote to the fearfulness that we might feel. I'll just say one more thing about that.
Yeah.
I think that fear often is the result of of being too much in your own identity and wondering if the very specific self that you think you have is enough to meet the experience that you're having. But in bikepacking and in cycling in general, and in lots of athletic endeavors and a lot of like effortful expert practices, woodworking, dancing, piano playing, cooking, in a lot of those kinds of practices, the distinction between yourself and the world disappears to a certain extent. And so the sources of your fear then diminish because you're not testing your worries and wonders about yourself against where you are. You're just in the experience. You're just present in the experience. Right. So I wanted to present that as a kind of
do you
response.
Meditate?
I do.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't pretend that I'm an expert meditator by any stretch. That takes a lot of practice, and it takes a teacher to make sure that you're meditating in a way that's healthy for you. So
I've started. I know you know Sam Harris, being the professor that you are. And,
absolutely.
We talked about that, but I've been following his Waking Up app.
Yeah, very good.
Through meditation. So I'm just new to the idea of meditation, but I just recently went on a bikepacking trip before this one to West Virginia, and it was the first time I got to try to practice some of those meditation. Well, I've been practicing on like just in town rides and trying to meditate while I'm riding and get in that place where anything you're feeling can evaporate. I mean, you can evaporate the problems that you're feeling at home, or it's just you're evaporating, or it is evaporating through meditation.
That's right.
So I was just curious. It's something I'm very new to and learning to use as a tool, but I can already see just through my limited experience how valuable it can be to just focus on it can be anything. It can be your breath. It can be the repetitive motion of your feet going up and down. It could be the leaves falling, and you just like, you live in that moment and you allow those things to be the experience, and then that nagging whatever it was is no longer the experience. The knee that was hurting, or those things just fall away.
You've said it exactly right. And I like that you're using this word nagging, because one of the things that meditation does is it enables your attention to not be co-opted by these tiny distractions that come into all of our heads. And I think fear is often the result of those tiny distractions. You're worried about where am I going to find water to refill the bottle, or where am I going to sleep tonight, or am I in a dangerous situation right now, or how much further do I have to go? And those tiny worries can accumulate into this nagging presence that then takes over all your attention, and you're not there in the moment anymore. Right. But meditation is a way, or can be a way, and it takes practice. It takes some understanding of the history of meditation as a practice. But meditation can be a way to resolve your attention.
Meditation is an intentional way to do it. But I think what you were talking about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like, I mean, we've all been there when we've been on a bike trip where we are either overwhelmed by the beauty,
Absolutely.
Or we are overwhelmed by the difficulty,
Absolutely.
Or we get caught up in the minutia, and all of a sudden we realize that we forgot about we were afraid of bears, or we forgot about that because we're just so overwhelmed by it. So it's kind of like a meditation. You kind of get into the same place. It just happens. And
you're right that you don't need to set out to meditate during your bikepacking trip. You can, but
I do.
You don't.
But you don't have to.
But you don't have to, because you're right that the bodily motions themselves lend themselves to a release from those kinds of co-opting distractions.
Right.
And I love the way you're saying it, that what we're trying to do is be in a place, in a geography, in a history, if we're moving through a country that expresses its history in the powerful ways that countries can. And all of that is different from what you were worried about while you were packing at home, because that's a time when you're not in this meditative state. That's a time when you're hyper focused on what can go wrong, because you're forming a plan for how to respond. That totally makes sense.
You should be, yeah.
You should be.
That's when you should be doing all that prep work.
Right. But then when you're out there in it, all that fear or you can find yourself in a beautiful place where that fear is not the dominant presence in your psychology anymore.
Yeah. So let's go through some of the other tips that you have for fear.
For fear, yeah. So the other thing I wanted to say about fear, which I've tried to make sense of more in my life, is that sometimes the fear I have obscures the fact that where I am and what I'm doing is fearful for the people and the beings around me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, fear it can be so consuming that somehow we lose track of the fact that there are others with us, and their emotions are part of this bigger interaction. And once you have their emotions in play, then your fear doesn't seem like it's the main thing anymore. Yeah. And so one of the stories I wanted to tell to this great group is traveling in South Africa and being by myself and riding in the middle of the night with my headlamp and coming down these switchbacks and stopping for a reason that I had no awareness of or couldn't discern, and then having my headlamp play against the bushes and know that something was there and something was different, and seeing these two pinpoints of emerald and then seeing two eyeballs and then seeing that resolve into a leopard, and that meeting, right, that leopard was 10, 12 meters away from me. Like, that meeting was a meeting where my heart started pumping, but I knew and thought her heart was pumping too, and we were meeting each other as two beings in this world, in fear and suspicion and in wonder. And I just imagine this leopard thinking, "What are you and why are you here?" Right? Here I'm straddling a bicycle, and I was wondering of the leopard, "What are you and why are you here?" And that, working through that relation with the other emotional beings around me, has been a source of a kind of antidote to fear, where there's much more going on emotionally in our world when we're with other people or with other living things than just that pinprick of fear that I'm experiencing now.
That's not to diminish the fact that panthers are dangerous animals.
Not at all. Right, not at all. And that, right.
Just for safety reasons.
Yeah, you have to have your wits about you, for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, as you immerse yourself in nature, having a respect and an understanding of the fact that, number one, you're in their home.
Right.
And number two, at least in my experience, I mean, if you're in the desert and there's a rattlesnake, he doesn't want to harm you.
Right.
Biting you causes him to use a tremendous amount of energy,
right.
and
Massive
resources
cost
that he needs.
That's right.
So you were doing that animal a disservice, you know. So, right. A lot of that fear. I mean, I'm kind of spitballing here, but a lot of that fear, I think, just comes from a lack of understanding and education of the environment that you're in. I know that when you're looking at panther, you weren't like. I mean, you knew that this was a real serious thing, but you also respected the fact that you were in probably his home.
Right. And the South Africans that I told the story to later were envious that I'd had this opportunity, and I want to hold on to that fact that it was a chance to do something and see something and be somewhere that not everybody has, and it was extraordinary to be there at that moment.
I can't imagine staring down. What did you say, 15 meters, 12 meters?
Yeah, 12 meters. Yeah. A big, very strong animal. Yeah. A beautiful animal.
I love how all these stories or all these ideas on fear are born from very real, could be fearful, experiences that you've had and you've worked through. And all right, so keep going.
Yeah, and then the last one is, for me, the most complicated one. This last lesson that fear has taught me. And the way I want to put it now is that fear, when I have it, when I know it in my bones, as we all do, it's an invitation for me to ask myself, to interrogate myself as to what it is I'm fearful of. Because you don't always know. You often or it seems to me you often misidentify what it is you're afraid of. And in moving in different cultures through histories and through human flux, the change that human beings cultivate around themselves, moving through all that in your life can be a source of fear, but it might well come from a confusion or an ignorance or a prejudice or a foolishness, a small-mindedness on your part. So and again, I'm talking about myself here, so I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just trying to say that in traveling the world and spending time in Pakistan and spending time in Guatemala, in riding bicycles in Nepal, the experiences that I've had interacting with people are ones that maybe are initially ones of suspicion or fear or concern, but then I want to interrogate that and ask myself, like, what is it that I'm being afraid of right now?
Right.
Because often enough I find out that I don't endorse in myself the attitude that led to that fear. So I think about traveling in Cuba, the beautiful country of Cuba, which Logan and Virginia and I did recently, and we met with the greatest beauty in people, in talking to people, the greatest kindness in talking to people, and you know, if you think of Cuba as a place of whatever, Castro's politics or its sort of outsized presence in 20th century Caribbean and therefore North American history, you might think, okay, go to Cuba, and as someone from the USA, you might take some heat or flack, but if you're afraid of that, you're totally wrong, right? Because we're human beings and we're connected by our humanity, and we found that again and again in Cuba. On the flip side of that, though, if that's the right way to put it, I think that it's important not to travel with a sense of entitlement, that you're entitled for people to be nice to you and be good to you and to take care of you, right? If
it's still self-supported.
Yeah, it's still self-supported, and in this deep way, it's self-supported.
Right,
it's emotionally you're self-supporting and self-supported. I like that you're saying it in terms of something that we all recognize, self-support. Right. It's still self-supported, and I recently...
Yeah, the world doesn't owe you anything. Those people don't owe you anything. You've experienced amazing kindness and generosity, but that's not your right.
That's not your right, exactly. Yeah. And to think it's your right is to disrespect the lived experience of the people who are there in a place where you're a guest.
Yeah.
And so I know we talk about bikepacking in terms of being explorers or exploration, and I get why we use that word. It's sort of a fun, provocative way of putting it. But we're not explorers. We're, in the best of circumstances, we're guests in places where other people have lived for as long as human beings have been around. Yeah. And so, recently I had a chance to tour in Ethiopia, and we had set aside 3 weeks for this tour. And in the first week, we'd had some of the most beautiful and transcendent experiences that we could imagine. Ethiopia has had human beings living there since there's been human beings.
That's amazing. And
it's an amazing place, an amazing landscape, amazing history. And Ethiopians are proud of never having been colonized by European powers. And so we loved being there. And we had... I don't know how many minutes, how many thousands of minutes are in the first 8 days that we had, but we had that many thousands of minutes of incredibly positive experiences. But we also had an hour that was pretty tough, and an hour when we had done something we know not what, and some folks in the village made it known that they didn't want us to be there. And I don't tell these stories to frighten. I tell these stories to try to illuminate my own sense of fear, where Logan and Virginia were beaten with sticks and stones as they rode away, and our other friend Joel was hit with sticks as they rode down the road, and I couldn't escape from that situation, and I was held for 20, 25, 30 minutes, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and the way that I left that situation was a matter of luck, and sort of look back at it. It's something I wrote about for the second issue of the Bikepacking Journal.
So there's a full account of this story in the second journal.
Yeah, in issue 2 of the Bikepacking Journal, and that was that was a catharsis to write the piece
Yeah.
and to talk about it and think about it. But I guess what I want to emphasize now is not that we had a tough moment, which we definitely did do, and we ended our trip and we ended it in a certain sadness. But I'm not trying to tell the story for that reason. But I want to share the story as an example of trying to overcome a sense of being entitled to people being nice to me, right? We're guests, and they're the people that we visit, the people who are hosting us, have their own lives that they're understanding and navigating in their own way. And so if I go to the world with a fear that that's going to happen again, or if I go to the world with a fear about the worst case scenario of how people can interact, that's to treat human interaction in this kind of confused, idealized way. We're human beings.
Yeah.
Stuff can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And that gives me a calm. Right?
It could happen in Chicago, or it could happen in Texas.
Yeah, right. I mean, I grew up in New York City, and I live half the time in New York City these days. And it's I hear from friends like, oh, I could never visit the city. It seems so busy. Isn't it? Can I walk around Central Park at night? And it's like, yeah, New Yorkers will be really nice to you.
Yeah, we live in a society where negativity draws ads and
that's
sells.
That's right.
And you're, that's what's so neat is that you're just like, well, I'm just going to go over there and find out for myself.
Right.
And I'm going to bring that back. I'm going to share my experiences. The other neat thing that you've done is you're creating routes in all these places. So you're making it accessible for other people to experience something similar to what you experienced, so that's really neat.
Thanks.
Well, we have to go because we're on a tight schedule here.
Yep.
But
thanks for having me.
I just want to say that anyone who wasn't here and didn't get a chance to hear that missed out. Like, I've talked to so many people here, and that was a really standout, powerful story and lesson for people to hear. It's coming from a place of experience of going around all over the globe and interacting with, whether it's wildlife or people or whatever it is, and to get that in such a powerful and a meaningful way really hit home.
Thank you.
Thank you for going out and doing all those things, and then bringing it back and sharing it with us so we can all benefit from your experiences.
Appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go do it.
Let's go.
All right. All right. Thank you for sticking around, and I hope that I didn't oversell Joe. I don't think so. He's a pretty special man with a lot of neat experiences, and he's really able to articulate them, and they're obviously very well thought out ideas. And anyway, thank you, Joe, for coming on the podcast. If you want to follow him on Instagram, he's at Joe Cruz Pedaling. And all right. Well, if you stuck around this long, hopefully that's because you are enjoying the show and you're getting something out of it, for which I'm very grateful. But like I said at the beginning, this show wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for the people who support it. You have never heard an advertisement on this show. There are no sponsors. It's just me talking to people, sharing my opinions. They're unfiltered, and not everybody's going to like them. Not everybody's going to like me, and that's okay. But nothing that I talk about is filtered down in any way. So I hope you understand and I can appreciate the value in that, and would like to also help. The number one drive right now is for the van, and I'm calling this drive the Van or Death Drive, right? And the truth is, I failed to mention this at the very beginning, but yesterday, spoiler alert, I bought the van. It was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. It was just so perfect. So I'll take a minute to tell you about it. It's a 2005 Ford E250, has 118,000 miles on it. It's one owner. It was an older couple that it actually came with a bike rack installed in the back cargo area, and they'd already insulated it, and they would sleep in the back. They'd take it to Colorado and all over and sleep in the back. And so it was already like set up for what I want to do, because my idea is have a bed in the back and some storage, and then in the middle will be a podcasting studio. One of the main chairs in front, one of the captain's chairs or whatever, is going to swivel around and be able to record a podcast anywhere. The thing is just so clean. They have every single receipt, everything that's ever been done to the van in the last 15 years. And it was just too good of an opportunity to not go ahead and pick it up. But I feel comfortable. I feel confident that y'all are going to really dig that idea and hopefully prove me right. So I feel really good about it. I'm super stoked. I'm absolutely in love with this van. I cannot wait to turn it into a little mobile studio and drive around the country and talk to people. We're actually going to be taking it out to Spirit World 100 here in about, a few days. And that'll be the first test drive of the real test of the van. So I'm looking forward to it. So please, if you can, head over to GoFundMe or the link in my Instagram profile. Donate what you can. Like I said, if you want to only donate $1 or $2, that's totally cool. It really does add up. And my wife appreciates it, because I've assured her that I'm going to get this thing funded by the listeners who love this show. So prove me right, please. All right, enough about the van. I think it's going to be sweet, but there's only so much you can say about a van, right? And we're here to talk about bikes. Oh, wait, no, right now we're here to talk about how you can support Bikes or Death. Really, the easiest thing you can do is go to bikesorddeath.com, and there you can either sign up as a Patreon, which is a monthly donation, anything from $1 up to whatever you want to give every month. It is very, very important. I rely on that money, and I use it to fund stuff like recording equipment or travel charges or merchandise or a van. The other way you can support the show is just go to PayPal. Again, there's a link on my website, and a one-time donation. If you like this episode, you thought it was really good, you could say, all right, well, I appreciate that one. That was a good one. Here's $1. Here's a couple bucks. A lot of people have been taking advantage of that, and that is so great. Thank you so much. And then lastly, while you're there on the website, just go ahead and check out the merchandise. We got some sweet stickers and shirts, and I'm working on getting some more stuff in there for all you lovely people. So go in there and check that out. All right. Again, thank you for everybody who supports this show. It really would not be what it is without all the support from listeners like you who make it happen. Next week's interview is another one in the Bikepacking Summit series with Kate. She's one of the owners of Mulberry Gap in ELJ, Georgia. I can't say that. I'm just going to say Elijah, Georgia. And it was great. She, again, you've probably heard me talk about her and her husband, Andrew. They have an amazing facility there in the National Forest. And they're just great people, wonderful humans who love riding bikes. And it was great to talk to her. So next week we will have her. In the meantime, what could you do to fill your time in the meantime? I mean, you could mow your lawn, you could clean the house, you could reorganize, you could decorate for Christmas. Or, you know what? You just say fuck it and go ride your damn bike.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes.